Hi and welcome back. I've been conspicuously absent for the last couple of months. I know I said I was going to make more videos. I had a little bit of a, what can I say, bandwidth problem, but it should be fixed now. I wanted to get into kind of a philosophical topic today, and I wanted to mention something, and I wanted to share just a few things with you and a few updates. So what I'm going to talk about today has to do with Buddhism, and I think it's a concept that's gone through Buddhism, it's gone through China, it's been handed down, through Japan. It's kind of a vague concept. I think it also comes from Taoism. And simply put, it's called the one versus the 10,000, or the one thing versus the multitude. And often 10,000, because it's a big number, was kind of used for that, okay, the multitude. You've seen it many places. I did a video before where I talked about, saying the Nembutsu prayer either one time or 10,000 times. That has to do with the same thing. You see this feature in many sources. I think that Bruce Lee's referred to it. I think that I've seen it in the Tao Te Ching. I've seen it in Miyamoto Musashi, okay, the samurai who wrote books, especially the book of the Five Rings, back in ancient Japan. So it's a concept that's tumbled through a lot of Asian philosophies, and it's the kind of thing I've ruminated about for a long time because I wasn't quite sure what to think about it. So I want to give you what I feel it to mean after thinking about it for a long time. So it's basically used. You could use it in many different ways. But I think that the way it's typically used is the one thing is literally what I'm doing right now as I'm speaking this to you. The one thing you could think of as the one moment, okay? The moment that your heart's beating, the moment that you're breathing, the moment that you're alive, and the multitude, the 10,000 things, that's the kind of things that you leave over. So me speaking this is the one thing. You watching this in a video, or any video that I could possibly make from that, the video is the 10,000 things. It's the leftovers, right? Which you can go through many, okay, because there's such a multitude, okay? But making the video, doing the thing live, something happening to you live is the one thing, okay? What you're doing at that moment, at that time in your life is the one thing, and the 10,000 things are the leftovers, right? You could think of it in many different ways. I often think of it as, how there's a general shape to who you are because of your skeleton. Then there's the meat that's on the bones, right? The live, living tissue that makes you alive. So I think that generally speaking, what most people would say is the one thing is the most important thing, right? The one thing, what you're doing right now with your life is the most important thing. The 10,000 things, the multitude, it's not as important. I don't quite think that that's true now so much, because I think that really speaking, there is a balance between yin and yang. So one really is just as useful as the other. So what I mean is, like say for example, if there were some person, some great person who led a great life, that's great. But there's no way for you to know exactly what it was, right? Unless there is something left over. So I think that we've come to a point where, things in life, we have the ability to record what they are so well. So we can look into the past so well. Because there's video evidence of it, right? There's actual quotes, writings, things that you can actually point to and say, this is what happened during this time. But we've actually kind of overstepped that, because isn't it funny how nowadays, where we have so much media to record what people are saying, what people are doing at a certain time, I don't think we've ever been more confused. Because you can manipulate media, you can manipulate video, you can focus in on things, and you can present information in a very tricky way. But anyway, I don't want to get off into the tangents in that. What I'm talking about for myself in the one thing versus the 10,000 things is the 10,000 things is very important, because I would always think of the one thing, right? The live moment of your life is the most important. But really, I think it's vitally important to go into the past. And I think it's vitally important to have a realistic understanding of what came before you yourself can move on with your life in any kind of good path. Because if you don't, it becomes too chaotic. It's like any step that you take, it's just going to get buried over. You know what I mean? So we need to have, if a person led a great life, it's good to have some sort of access back to that, to see what they did. So I think of myself, I don't think that my life has been, what you'd call like out of a Hollywood story or something like that. I was never like this great, athlete or musician or scientist or anything like that. I'm just a simple guy, but I accomplished my goals, and I'm very proud of what I've done with my life. And recently I've been looking back on it, looking back on the things that I had, and I kind of came to the conclusion that I've gotten to the point in my evolution of myself where I have so many things that are left over. I've got so many of my 10,000 things, and I don't necessarily have them recorded or preserved in the best way, but that's what I want to do. So I've made a decision. I got something. I'll show it to you now. I got one of these. I'd recommend if anybody likes to have these kind of things. This is it's like a photo, recorder or a scanner. So what you basically do is like put pictures in and it scans it basically as you put them in. And I've used that because I have a lot of books that I have, but honestly speaking, I never read them. And I'll give you an example. If you recall, before a video that I made, it was a review of the game Knights of the Round, which was an arcade game by Capcom, and I talked about how that was tied to me, and there was this book that I had. It's called King Arthur and His Knights, and I love that book so much. It's a part of my childhood. I've been keeping it. I mean, the copyright on it, I believe, is 1924, right? So it's coming close to 100 years old. And I lugged it around with me. I brought it with me to when I went to Hawaii, my university years in Hawaii. Then I lugged it to Japan. Then I lugged it back from Japan. And I went over my things and I'm like, I'm not reading it. I don't read it. And it's a shame because it's a really good book. I love Arthurian legend, but I just don't. And so I had to make these decisions. I really want to preserve things. I really want to preserve the things that I really like and I want to keep with me for a long time. But I have to put them in a format to where I'm actually going to see them. Because if not, I'm just not going to, right? So I've decided to convert a lot of my older books into the format where I can keep it and have it on my computer. So it's kind of I don't know, I have mixed feelings about this, but I wanted to share it with you. I'm kind of sad, but just let me explain, because I took my book and I murdered my poor book. Okay, here's my book. I had to cut it into pieces. I had to, take the glue out of it. This is my century-old book. But I decided if I'm never going to read it, that's not really good. And so what I did was I took that and I converted it to data. So now the good thing is, not only do I have it for all time, right? Now I have it here on my tablet. Okay, King Arthur and His Knights. I've got all of that data. Okay, all the pictures, all the things that were in that book. And now I can say to you that I've finally read it. I finally read it for the first time in a long time. It's kind of a neat lighting effect, but let me get rid of it just so I can continue on my discussion. So yeah, I just kind of thought to myself, what's the point of having a library if the books in the library just kind of crumble to pieces and you lose that information? At some point, you have to kind of pick, You can't have every single book that you've ever had unless you're going to do what I just did now and, get the data from it. Right? And there are some things, and I'm going to show you something else that I got that I didn't do that for, but for a lot of things, I do want it in some sort of way that I can actually get it, keep it, and have that data with me forever. But I understand the other side, which is you kind of also want to have that book. It's special to you. You know, you kind of like to have that tactile feel of a book that's in your hands that you've actually had this kind of relationship with. You know, I know that might sound kind of funny, but I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. It's important to you. And so I almost feel kind of sad, like, you know, I've killed a friend of mine. But at the same time, King Arthur and his Knights, you know, it's a book that I've had with me for a long time. But if I never read it, and I'm literally going to just keep on aging and never read it, I don't really see the point of that. So that was the kind of thing that I thought, you know what, I can preserve this. You know, it's a book, it's special to me. It is old, but it's going to keep on getting older, and who knows if a fire comes or if, you know, something happens. So I'm going to have that with me. And something that's of the same vein, but I decided not to do it, is something a little bit more special. I'm going to show you something. There's a really nice story behind this. This is kind of a book of things that were, how can I say? There was a time in Japan where me and my wife, we went to my sister-in-law's school because she was an elementary school teacher. And it's one of the most kind of beautiful stories that I have in Japan, because it was one of the times that I went to, so I went to the school, and they just wanted to meet a foreigner, right? And so I went there, I said a few words, and I started playing games with him. I played Simon Says. You know, Japanese kids, they know a few words, so, you know, if you just make small games out of it, they have so much fun. And it was funny because it was like one of the only times in my life I was kind of treated like a rock star. You know, like the kids were so happy. They had so much fun. I had been teaching in Japan for about 2 years by that time. And actually, maybe 1 year. This is 2008, and I got there in 2007. So I've been teaching for a year, and I knew what fun games that kids respond to. So they'd play Simon Says, and, you know, touch the wall, and, you know, touch the window, and they'd run back and forth. They had a lot of fun doing it. And then when it was time to leave, the kids were, like, really sad. And then I remember there was this one time where, you know, when you're going into a Japanese school, you have to take your shoes off and put on these slippers. Then at that place, that genkan, you have to, you know, put on your shoes and kind of go back. So the kids were, like, going to walk me out, and there's, like, 50, 60 kids. And then one little boy comes up to me, and he puts out his hand like he wants to shake my hand. So I'm like, okay, I'll, you know, shake his little hand. I shook his hand. My other hand, immediately, 5 kids latched onto my other hand. And so I've got, like, 5 kids on this side, I got 5 kids on this side, and, like, they're just so happy to, you know, shake my hand and to be with me. So, like, okay, let's go. You know, like, we go outside. And this little girl says to me in Japanese, you know, are you ever going to, like, come back? And so one little trick that I did when I was in Japan was, even though I could speak Japanese fairly well, I try not to speak at all, because if they know that you can speak their language, they'll just do that, you know? And so it's kind of a sacrifice that I make on their behalf, you know? Like, I understand what they're trying to say when they're trying to say things to me. Like, oh, I don't understand this word. What does this mean? And I'll always just kind of sit there and pretend like I don't know what they're saying, you know? Because if they were in a situation with a person who didn't speak Japanese, they would have to find that strength. And I think that kind of helped them. But in the short term, they're like, oh, man, you know, like, I wish this person would speak up in Japanese. So I usually didn't do it. But these kids, I'm like, you know, they're really happy to see me, and there's no reason, now that I'm out, you know, I'm on my way out the door, there's no reason I can't speak. So this little girl says to me, you know, hey, Mr. Sean, are you going to be able to come back and see us? And so I kind of bent down where nobody could see, and I said to her in Japanese, I don't know, but maybe if there'll come a time, you know, I'd like to, you know, see you guys again. And that touched her. Like, you could just tell she was so shocked. He speaks Japanese, oh my god. And so she wrote me a letter, and I think this is like a letter from all those kids that says, like, you know, thank you for being there. There's no way that I can kind of show it to you easily, but, you know, there's like all kinds of notes, handwritten notes written in there that say thank you for being there. And there's one that I read, and it's from that same girl, and she says, like, for a moment he bent down and he spoke to me in Japanese. Sean Daisuki. She wrote, like, That's really, really cute, and that's really, really touching. That particular thing is one of the things that was a really special moment. And so this right here, this little book that was made for me of thank you notes, I want the data from it, honestly, because I do want to protect it from a fire or something like that. But I'm not going to do the same thing that I did to King Arthur and his knights. I still have the data from this, and I actually read the book, okay, because I actually have the data. This right here, these were like handwritten and very, very rare, very, very special. So this is the kind of thing that I'm probably not going to do the same thing. Maybe I'll find some other way to get the data. In fact, I'll probably try to take a picture of that particular note from that little girl and put it on the screen, and maybe give a translation so that you guys can understand who don't speak Japanese. But there's a very small number of things like this that I actually have enough space to keep, right? So those things I do want to keep. Those are my very, very special things out of the 10,000 things. And this book right here, I love this book, and I love a lot of my books, but I can't keep them all with me unless I, get the data from them. So that's what I'm going to do for those two things. And again, as this relates to our discussion about the one thing versus the 10,000 things, I think the 10,000 things is kind of underrated because it's extremely important. The live moment of your life is vitally important, right? I don't think that anybody questions that. In fact, I think what typically happens is that nobody questions that. They say the live moment is more important than anything. And I think actually not necessarily. If you're future-wise, it is very important to preserve the past. In fact, sometimes it's more important. Like where would we be if we didn't have any writings of what happened thousands of years ago? Where would we be if we didn't have technologies that were built upon from many, many years ago that we can verify and use up to now? How would we know, things that like dinosaurs and things like that existed? We would have no idea if they didn't have bones, if they didn't have the 10,000 things that they left over for us. And so I got to thinking about that, and I got to thinking about my own legacy as a person, and I think that when I finish Fist of the North Star, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to tell my own life story. And there's a few things that kind of prompted me in that direction. Again, a lot of things that have to do with me and have to do with me as a teacher, because a lot of those experiences are just so important. But I'll just end on this one thing. When I first was a teacher, I didn't have full class of Japanese students, so I had to do some English teaching to people who were non-native speakers. And it was really nice. In fact, my students gave me this at the end of the year. This is my first year teaching, but they made this for me. Okay, world's best teacher, and they signed it and all this. So these were my ESL students, and it was my first year. Honestly, I don't think I was particularly cut out for it, because the teachers who were in that department, they know the books, they know materials much, much better than I do. But I've been teaching in Japanese, so I kind of know what, foreign people who are foreign to English, I know generally what they want, and it's been my specialty to teach, people language. I've always loved it. But anyway, in that classroom, I remember there was this moment where I'm teaching family members, right? So I'm teaching them how to say, my uncle, my nephew, my niece, all this stuff. And then I asked them as a classroom, okay, raise your hand if you know your grandmother or grandfather. Every hand goes up. Raise your hand if you know your great-grandmother, great-grandfather. And most of the hands went down. Maybe out of about 40 kids, 7 or so knew their great-grandparents. I said, okay, keep your hands up if you know your great-great-grandparents. Every single hand goes down. And I just started thinking about that, and I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice to know, who they were? Wouldn't it be nice to know, how they thought, what they looked like, what their lives were? But literally, you could revive my great-grandfather, put him in front of me, and I'd be like, I don't know who this person is. It's not that I don't want to know, it's not that I don't have any curiosity, it's that literally there is no 10,000 things. There is no leavings of what that person did, so I really can't know them, you know? In this regard, Japanese are very, very good at keeping those 10,000 things. You go to families now, just regular families, and they can trace their family history back hundreds, 200 years. I remember last time I was in Japan, which was 2018, we went to like one of our family members' households, and on the wall they had pictures that went back to the Meiji era. And it was funny, you could see them dressed in normal clothes, then dressed in kimonos, because it went back through the ages. And they knew their names, at least. They knew where they resided. They knew who they married. They at least knew that much. Now, you can't know every single thing about them, but you can know that much. And today, with the technology we have, you can learn and you can know so much about who they were by what they leave. So in certain ways, I do take my YouTube channel kind of seriously in that regard, in that I actually get a voice to talk to somebody. I get to leave something, for people in further generations. Even if I'm not, a millionaire, even if I'm not a king, even if I'm not a general, there is a few things special that I've done in my life and that I do want to share with everybody. And yeah, I just wanted to basically mention this philosophical point, going back to the one thing versus the 10,000 things. The one thing is important. The 10,000 things, I think, is underrated, and I think it's also very, very important. And that's probably what I want to devote the rest of my life to. Okay, because I've accomplished mostly what I've wanted to accomplish. If I give bullet points, I stayed with my wife. I found a good wife to marry. I stayed with my wife. I gave my son a better opportunity than I had, and I think that that's generally everybody's goal. And I accomplished my dream, the dream that I had ever since I was in high school. I became a Japanese teacher. That's what I wanted to do. So I will put that story forward, and probably it's going to be something that I'm going to keep on doing little by little, as the years go on. But in either case, I want to say thank you for watching. If you have any comments to make about the one thing versus the 10,000, that's a very, very long discussion to have. But generally speaking, I think, as I said before, the one thing gets all the credit, and it is important. I don't want to understate that its importance. I just want to emphasize the 10,000 things is just as important. I think your leavings are just as important as the live. Anyway, thank you for watching. Mite kurete arigatou gozaimasu. Sayonara.